In this video, we're going to focus on how we can create what we call a threshold line on a polar area chart. So as you can see here, this wonderful item here has this nice line here, and this can be adjusted in color and in size, making sure that it's exactly aligned with our values here. So let's start to look how to do this. So let's start to look how to add the threshold lines in a polar area chart in Chartjs. So the first thing what we're going to do is we're going to get our default code, which you can find here on chartjs3.com, getting started, or this specific link here. And you can find this link as well in the description box. Once you're on the site, scroll down to copy this entire chunk of code here. And if you want to understand what this code does, make sure you watch this video that explains it all. So once we did this, or copy that code, I want to paste that all in here. Then I will cut out the title here, put the title in here, and save it and refresh. There we are. So now we have a nice bar chart, but I want to convert it into a polar area chart. So to do this, first of all, I want to adjust the width here, because a polar area chart is a square type of chart. So if I refresh, we reduce that width, but then we're going to convert this bar into polar area chart, or polar area. Once I did this, I need to remove these scales here. A polar area chart has a scale, which is the R scale or the radial scale, but it doesn't have a X or Y scale, because we're not working with vertical and horizontal lines, but we're working with circular lines or radial lines, or circles, probably the right term. Alright, so now we have this. So what I want to do now is I want to put here a nice circle around. In Chartjs, I'm not able to find the right way to get the coordinates here. So what we have to do is to create a formula for this. Don't worry, it's quite easy once you understand what you're doing. So let's start to do this now. First thing what I want to do here is I'm going to say here comma after the options here, comma, and I'm going to say plugins to create our plugin, and our plugin will be called, let's call it our threshold lines, something like that. And it can be anything you want. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say here this threshold lines plugin block, and then we're going to say a constant threshold lines equals, there's the ID threshold lines. And once we have this, what we want to do next is we're going to say here, when are we going to draw these beautiful lines or circles? Now in our case, when I want to draw them here is I want to draw them after the dataset has been drawn. So you can see here, we're going to make a very narrow line, but easy to spot on the datasets. And I realized that I will remove the tooltip for a minute. Let's do your plugins. Just remove the tooltips because they're very distracting. I'm going to say tooltip. Then we're going to say enable equals false. Comma, save. There we are. Basically here, because you have the lines here, you can see here we have these lines, and we will be drawing on top of these, or depending on a threshold, but we want to make sure that it's on top of the data set itself. So this is what we call timing. So, but of course, if we're doing this, we want to make sure that the line is very, very narrow, so it's easy to read whatever is behind there and to spot. So let's start to work on this. So what I'm going to do here is, first of all, we have these threshold lines here, so we're going to say here, after data sets, the draw, so we're going to draw this after the data set. So basically the data set will be drawn first, and then we draw these lines. You can also do it before the data set, one or the other you want. In my case, I would select this specifically. Then what I want is I'm going to use 3 arguments here. We're going to use some more advanced stuff as well, so that will be fun. So the first thing is the chart, which is the chart argument. The second one is the arguments here, although we won't be using that one. And then the final one will be the options, or what we could say the plugin options. So I'm going to say a plugin options, but you can use options, anything you want here. However, this is very descriptive, so I like that. Now what I want to do is I want to create what we call an object destructuring, because we have this chart here, but what I want to do here, for example, if I need to get certain items here, let's say I want the CTX, normally I have to say chart.ctx, and this is quite cumbersome in the long run, because you will have many times these commands. So what I'm going to do here is object destructuring, so I'm going to say constant, then say curly braces, and then here chart, and then what we're basically doing is we're going to tear apart the layers of the chart argument. So we're going to say, of the chart object. So then what we're going to say here, CTX, which is in here, And then what we can do here as well is the chart area. This will be important. So the chart area, then we have top, bottom, left, right, and then width and height. So the chart area, and this is very, very important, is basically the area where the chart is being drawn in, and which is just this rectangle here. So it's not the full circle. So it's just the white, including the white space here until the very end here. Although it's not this part here, the legend is not being considered part of the chart area because it's not part of the chart, which makes sense. So now we have this. What I want to do then is I want to start drawing some items here. But we have to really think, how do we get, for example, the center here? Because I need to get the center here of this point. Luckily, we have what we call the chart area, where we have the height or the width, so we can calculate. Although there's another way, and I'm going to show you exactly how we're going to do this one. So what I'm going to do here, I realize that we can probably get the radial scale as well. So I'm going to say scales. I'm going to put in here scales .r, because sorry, not even .r. I want to say here r. All right. So then we have here the radial of the scale radial. So now we can use just r, and it goes basically from chart to scales.r. That's basically what it did. So now I'm going to say here console r to see what the radial scale has. So if I open up here, you can see here we get many of these things. Don't worry about that. All we need is, because of the animation, that's why it's doing that. All we need is here to look at one specific item. So basically what we need to calculate is here, and we can calculate based on the height and divide by 2, but it's not necessary. Why? Let's look at this here, and this is very, very interesting. We have here, if we look here, the Y center, which would indicate the center of this would be 277 pixels. So what we could do now is we could calculate this, and that's the position. So it's not the length of it, no, it's the position. Because we have here this part here, and then if we do this, the Y center minus the top, which is basically starting here. So somewhere here is 54 pixels, and then all the way here. So this would mean that the height of the full or of half of the circle is this. And this will be very important later on. So you might say, why do we need this? Well, basically we're going to draw a circle. So let me start to draw the circle first before I even do this, because then you will understand the logic. So what I'm going to do here, first of all, I'm going to say a ctx.save to save all variables involved. Secondly, what I want to do now is I want to create a starting path. So I say ctx.begin path, and this I do to avoid it. If ever there would be any other object that didn't close, that we have this, it will indicate this is a new shape. So please ignore any other shape if that will be not closed, because if not, sometimes you will have these things that are combined together. So then I want to say here the following. I'm going to say here we want to make the width of the line. So we're going to say ctx.line width, and this line width we can indicate as 1 pixel. So I want it very, very narrow, because it's a threshold. It's just to highlight something, but I don't want to block our view on reading these numbers. Next, what I want to do here is I want to give it a color. So we're going to say ctx.stroke style. And stroke style basically means, so think about this. We're working in a canvas, and in a canvas we will talk about paintings. So when you use a paintbrush and you make a line with that, we call it a paintbrush stroke. So in other words, a line with your paintbrush is called a stroke. So that's why we have here a stroke of a paintbrush. Alright, so we have this, and I'm going to grab here this border color here. That's beautiful. Once we have this semicolon here to assign the color of this, and then what I want to do here is we're going to start to create the arc, which is basically the circle. So ctx.arc, and the ctx.arc consists of 6 variables. First one is the x, and then second is the y, so basically the x and y coordinates. And then what we have is the radius, so how big in pixels our circle will be, and the radius is only a half circle. So that will mean basically the length of it. So, or the length of this. It's not diameter. So a circle like from here to that is basically the radius part. If we have from this part to here, that will be what we call a diameter, and the diameter will calculate the full length of it. So what I want to do here then next is course, we have the angle starting point, angle start, and then we have the angle end, which is basically the amount of degrees. And then finally we have here, is this counter clockwise, yes or no? So this will be, of course, no. It doesn't matter for us. We don't care about this one. This will be false. So let's start to work on this. And this is the reason why radius becomes very important when we have the height and the starting point. Because we need to know our position. So we can find our position basically with this here. The center, x center, and the y center. So that's the first one. So I'm going to copy this. And what we can do here now is, here instead of this we say r dot y center. Next I want to do here y, oh sorry, not y, but the r dot y center. So once we have this, then we still have to work a bit more, and the reason why is because we have this top here that is missing. So I want to show you that later on so you can see the difference. Then we have the radius here. You have to calculate the radius. For now I'll just make this 10, and we're going to later on work on this. And then we have here the starting angle, and the starting angle I'm going to make a variable for this. And the reason why we're going to do this is because this works with what we call the pi. So math.pi, so I'm going to say a constant angle equals math.pi. However, 1 pi, a full circle is 2 pi. 1 pi equals 180 degrees. So if you have a full circle is 360, so we need to have 2 pi. However, I don't want to make it so complicated because we're more used to 360 degrees. So what I want to say is if we have math.pi divide by 180 degrees. So whatever we have here, how many degrees we have here, that will be the one. So we say your angle multiplied by 0, which is of course 0. So you can put in here 0, doesn't matter so much. But this one here, multiplied by 360. Of course, if you have here smaller circles, you could create half shapes and moon look-alike shapes, etc., etc. So we have all of this now, and let's say here, put it on false. We have no counterclockwise, and save that. Once we did that, we're not done yet. We're going to say here ctx.stroke to draw the item. Then we're going to say here ctx.close-path. So if ever something else would be, or we indicate that now this is done, there should be no other elements being impacted by this. And finally, I want to say here ctx.restore to undo whatever we adjusted in colors, etc., etc. Save this, refresh. Alright, so now we have this. So you can see here we have this circle here, and how many pixels? It's 10 pixels. Or so this will mean 10 pixels here and 10 pixels down. So this is total. The total length of the circle is 20 pixels from top to bottom. Alright, so now what we want to do is, because I can imagine you say, well, hold on, how do we get these points here? For example, I want to have this one or that one or that. Alright, let's start to work on this. And that's why we had to calculate a few items, or that will become very important, because we cannot get the exact coordinates of this, or at least I don't know yet how. I'm sure that there is somewhere, but you might say, well, if I do 20, where do we get then? As you can see, we're getting not at the right place. So what I need to do here is to calculate, and that's why we had the y center. So I'm going to grab this y center now, and this becomes now very important for us. So what I want to do here is constant, and I'm going to say here, what would be the right term here? It's basically the true width, or the true height. I'll call it true height, and the reason why it's true height is basically the y center minus top. Y minus top, because we have this one here. So if we do this, and if I would just copy this, you say, what happens if we do it here? You will see that it will jump up a little bit more. Why? It calculates, I cannot highlight it, of course, because it's a canvas, sorry. It calculates this part as well. So if I do here, it deducts now. If I do here plus top, it will, of course, go down. Anyway, I want to have this one back in its original position. Here. However, the reason I need to know this, because the real circle is basically this to that, is truly whatever is in here. That's the true height of that circle, or 50% of it. Right? It starts from here to there. So now what I need to know is, because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or well, 18 items. So if I divide whatever the true height is by 18, I will get the radius of one item. So I'm going to say here, constant true height, let's say here radius, which is basically, we will be later replacing that, equals true height divided by, we can say 18, but what I want to do is, instead of 18, because that's a hard-coded number, I want to get a soft-coded number. So let's go back here in the console log, and let's scroll down here and look at what's the highest value. Well, we have the max value, the min value, we have the end value. I'll just grab the end value here, which is basically r.end. So r.end. Then if I save this, refresh. Alright, nothing happens yet, but now, if I say radius, put in here, do that. There we are. Alright, we have now only one item here. So if I would say here the radius, once we did this, the true height, we are going to give this priority in mathematics, and then we say multiply by, let's say we want to hit number 8. Alright, so we're going to do number 8, save, refresh. So now we get this, but we're getting close to it, but not exactly. You might say, why is this the case? Well, let me explain. We have here this one single pixel line here, and that is what we call the issue here. So we need to deduct this. If we will deduct this, eventually we're going to give this priority, although it should give already priority. Then we do minus 4. Why 4? Because we have 8, there's 1 pixel here, 1 pixel there, 1 pixel there, 1 pixel there. So we want to deduct this with 4 pixels. Then we should be exactly on the item. Alright, so that would mean that this works. If we do 6, and we do this, well now on 3. There we are. So now, what I'm going to do, of course, is let's start to play around, because this is still a bit hard-coded. So I'm going to give you something really, really fun to explore, which is the advanced item of plugin options. So what we're going to do is, we have this plugin here, and we have this ID here. I'm going to copy this ID, because this ID is basically an object name. So what I'm going to do here is, in the plugins, I'm going to say here now we have this new object name of threshold lines. And what I'm going to do here is, I want to make this one dynamic. And this would be basically whatever is the value here divided by 2. That makes sense. So we have that one. And of course, I want to have a color that is unique, that we can, or that the user might even can do it, and basically create a own custom plugin like that. So we're going to say here, threshold, let's say threshold value, and of course it should be colon, and let's say this will be number 2. If this is number 2, how can I say here number 2? Well, what we're going to do is, we're going to say here, plugin options. The plugin options is basically referring to the options here, so you could also reduce the, if you want to reduce it, you can just say options, doesn't matter. Although plugin options is very clear description. Say plugin options dot, and then how it really goes is like this: from the plugin options, which is the options, to threshold lines. So you can see here these options plugins, and then here threshold lines, and then what is the name? Threshold value. So you put it in there. So once I do this, then what I want to do here is minus this divide by 2. We'll give this priority, although in mathematics this should give already a default priority. If I save this now, refresh, there we are. So now if I change this to 8, save, there we are. So now we have created our own version of it, which is absolutely phenomenal. If we can do even 9, there we are. So what we're going to do now is, that's the final one, which is the color here as well. So we're going to do this, we're going to copy this, and then, or maybe here, let's say here, comma, threshold line, or sorry, not threshold line, threshold color. So then we can say here, this will be, let's grab, well, a different color here, and this one here, for example, copy, put it in here, comma. Alright, so now we have this here, and then of course, how do we assign that? Well, we'll do the same here. We say this will be equal to plugin options dot threshold color. Save this, refresh. There we are, and now we can change this, and we can change this to 15, for example. Look how beautiful it is. And that's basically the way we can play around with the threshold and give a threshold line on a polar area chart that is very nicely done and connected with our options plugins. So if you enjoyed this video, and maybe, well, when I talk about arbitrary lines, you want to do also arbitrary lines, not only for a polar area chart, but also For example, for your line chart or bar chart, in that case, I'm going to recommend you this one here on how to create an arbitrary line with text in Chartjs, which is also extremely interesting because it's specifically for, in this case, a line chart, but it can be for bar chart as well, where we also give it color, give it a line, and give some text.